she did to me in this post though. I really don't wish to talk about that dark time right now, as it is so hard for me to talk about it 13 years later. This is not an isolated story, just one of the most terrifying ones and the second closest I have been to dying. Anyway, on the day this particular event happened, my sister had decided that we would try to do something nice for our mother, as we had somehow found out it was her birthday. Our plan was to pour balloons over her before giving her a birthday coffee. This is probably at least an hour or two after dark, but she still made us make her one every night. We spent ages blowing up balloons for her and putting them in a small plastic toy bin. When my mother woke up, we were ready. I was in charge of pouring the balloons on her, and my sister had the coffee ready. This is when things went bad. I got the nod and lifted up the bin and turned it upside down, only to realize that I didn't have a good grip and was a little too short. I accidentally hit an edge on my mother's head. Have you ever felt that drop in the pit of your stomach? Looked over the edge of a cliff and your body tells you to back the hell up. I got that feeling. I knew I was going to die. My mother and I moved at the same time though. Thankfully, I had the advantage because she had to get off her beanbag. And honestly, that is probably the only reason why I am still alive. I sprinted as fast as I could. I ran to the back of the house and jumped out the window. All which hearing her screaming and her heavy footfalls on the floor. That night, I ran as fast as I could. I ran until I collapsed and could barely breathe. My hand really hurt, as I had somehow gotten a really deep, perfectly straight cut between my pinky and ring finger on my left hand. That it was deep to the point that you could see a straight line on the other side of my hand. That night, I snuck into the backyard of the house I was in front of and slept on a pile of mulch they had. No, these were almost all holiday homes, so no one was home. The next day, I snuck back home when I was completely certain my mother was asleep and spoke to my sister. She had definitely been beaten by my mother though. I never asked her what my mother did to her. We never told each other what she did to us unless she did it to both of us together. From what my sister told me was that when I ran, my mother grabbed a knife before she chased after me. My sister had seen her throw the knife at me as I jumped out the window. The cut I had was from the knife that she had thrown. From that day on until I was taken by CPS, less than a year later, I made sure that I always had a place that I could run to and hide. If you ever go to that location, you may find a few of these if you look hard enough. They're mostly in the top trees and made of a couple small pieces of wood. I avoided my mother as much as I could from that day on, which thankfully wasn't hard as she only ever spoke to us to give us punishment or when making demands. She didn't do any cooking, cleaning, or anything apart from sleep and TV. I still have this scar, and though it does come some extremely minor issues, they aren't as bad as they could have been, considering the size and location, only just between the bones of my two fingers. So, to my mother, who has almost killed me and terrified me more than anything else in my life, let's never meet again in this life or in any future life either. This happened way back in October of 2006. At that time, I was just a 19-year-old kid, always on the lookout for adventure. One Friday night, after wrapping up my shift at McDonald's, I met up with some friends who suggested we check out this haunted location called White's Bridge. My one buddy, Brandon, said he had recently learned about it and began telling us the legend associated with the 100-year-old wood-covered bridge. Never one to turn down a spooky experience, we all piled into my green Ford Taurus and headed out on our journey. Brandon gave directions, guiding me off the main road, and within minutes, we were on a dirt road, back road surrounded by woods and cornfields. Our only point of reference was the blinking cell tower off in the distance. We could tell we were getting further from the city as our cell phones began slowly losing service. As we rolled deeper and deeper into what legitimately felt like absolutely middle of nowhere, Brandon repeated the hoisted a rope up and over one of the bridge's rafters and hung himself. As far as I can tell now, the story is complete fiction, but we totally believed it at that time. After a long and bumpy ride, Brandon instructed me to turn right on an off-road. I wouldn't have even noticed it if he had not pointed it out. I took the turn, and there before us was the White's Bridge. It looked like something straight out of a horror film. An old wood-covered bridge, aged by time, sitting alone and above a river deep in the middle of nowhere. We parked the car on the side of the road and got out to explore. Immediately catching our eyes was a scarecrow lying abandoned at the entrance of the bridge. My friend Mike, who was known as somewhat of a risk-taker and a stupid one at that, picked up the scarecrow and lit it on fire. The hay body burst up into a ball of flames, and Mike waved it around proudly next to the old dry wood bridge. Realizing the risk, I told him to throw the damn thing in the river and put it out, which thankfully he did. After making sure there weren't any rogue embers that could ignite the bridge, Brandon suggested we get back in the car and pull it onto the bridge. He explained that the legend was that if you parked your car in the middle of the bridge, put it in neutral and killed the engine, the spirit of the dead farmer would push the vehicle forward to get it off the bridge. Naturally, we had to try this. We piled back in and did exactly as he said. We parked halfway across the rickety old bridge and killed the engine. We sat in the pitch black, saying nothing, waiting for anything to happen. The only sounds were the creaking of the bridge, the river flowing beneath us, and footsteps. Suddenly, the back driver's side doors open and a woman abruptly enters the back seat, cramming in next to my friends back there. She looked to be in her late 20s, early 30s, long straight black hair, slim, and wearing a plaid shirt and blue jeans. It's been a while, but this is essentially how I remember the conversation going. I saw your fire signal for me, she said. Wait, what? I replied, totally freaked out and at a complete loss for words. I'm so glad you came. My boyfriend's car broke down that way. I needed a ride back. My brain was doing its best to compute the situation. I'm sorry, but who are you? I asked. What are you doing here? I told you, she responded curtly. My boyfriend's car broke down over there. Can you please just give me a ride so I don't have to walk all the way back? She was pointing ahead towards a narrow road that forked off to the right on the other side of the bridge. My friend Mike, the scarecrow burner, and ever the gentleman added, I mean, if you need a place to stay, you're more than welcome to come crash at my place. I got plenty of drink and I interrupted him. No, lady, listen, I'm sorry. I don't know who you are. You just got in my car and this are really weird. You could be an ex-murderer for all I know, and I'm sorry, you have to get out. She glared at me in the rearview mirror. If it looks good, Gail, I would have been dead. I would have been done for. But you signaled for me, she responded in an irritated tone. We weren't signaling for you. Get out. She let out an angry sigh and got out, walking back in the direction from which she came and disappearing into the night. I started the engine right up and looked at my friends. They all had looks of disbelief on their face. Without saying a word, I put the car in drive and slowly rode forward and off the bridge. We needed to turn around and go back across the bridge to get back to where we had come from, and the only way to do that was to pull onto the side of the road that the woman said her boyfriend's car broke down, and then reverse. As I pulled onto the side of the road, my headlights illuminated the three posted signs that hadn't been able to see from the bridge. No trespassing, private property, and do not enter. Looking up the road, there was no sign of the woman. Wherever she went, it didn't appear she went that way. I didn't want to stick around though, so I backed up and crossed the bridge again, and from there began the journey home. We didn't have much to say on the ride home. I think we were all equally stunned, except for Mike, who asked if he knew anyone that would be aware of this at this hour, that he could subsequent visits. Sadly, some delinquents burned down the old White's Bridge some years ago. It was rebuilt, but from what I hear, it's just not the same as the original. I don't have any plans to go and check it out. To the strange lady who entered my car out in the middle of nowhere at 2 a.m., let's not meet. Worked at a hardware store in high school. We had a number of fairly regular customers, but there was one man in his mid-30s that became a regular after I checked his item out one night. I noticed that I kept seeing him on my shift, and he would continually try to strike up awkward conversations with me and hold up the line until I told him I had to take care of other customers. Our registers were in front of a large glass window, so anyone walking outside could see who was working. He eventually started to wait outside the window and tap on the glass to get my attention. After leaving, I rode my bike to work, and getting off late at night started to terrify me. One night, when I was working alone, he asked me if he could have my number and if I was 18. When I told him that I wasn't, he asked for my birthday, to which I replied to some arbitrary date in the distant future. I told my boss about this interaction, and from then on, she made sure I never worked alone, and she would follow his ass anytime he entered the store to the point where he stopped coming. The day of my fake birthday, or close to it, I could remember the exact date I had gave him. He came knocking on the glass again. It was busy and my boss wasn't around, so I tried to ignore him. I eventually noticed that the knocking had stopped, and I could only assume he had made his way into the store. Very soon after, I am greeted by his face in front of my register. He hands me a plastic grocery bag and says, "Happy 18th birthday." I am embarrassed, so I take the